Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Tuesday Talks with Mom. And this is a really exciting episode. Before I introduce our guest, I'm just going to tell you a little something. I was down in Dallas last week and I ran into a gal who was sitting at an Ohio table. And I sat down and started chatting, and it was Emily Gilbride, whom told me that she lived in Ohio and worked in Cincinnati. And I said, "Oh, I'm from Ohio." And lo and behold, she told me that she went to my alma mater for high school. So there we are in Dallas, Texas, meeting from the Jackson Polar Bears.
Yep.
I was so excited. And we grew up near each other, clearly a decade or so apart, because, we're not going to talk about my wrinkles or anything. So Becki Uccello, we are joined by Emily Gilbride, who is an alumni of my high school. Welcome, you
That
guys.
is so
Thank you both for
cool.
I
having me.
Small
know.
world.
Thank you so much. So I think it goes to show that you just never know where you come from, but you never know where you're going to end up. And it could be the same place. So look at that. So Emily, I would love to, I don't want to do any disservice to your story. So I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about what you do now
Sure.
down in Cincinnati, and then we'll talk a little bit about your school choice journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you both. So, I'm the executive director of Romero Academies. We are a Catholic school management organization. So, we work and partner with the Archdiocese of Cincinnati to manage two of their elementary schools, Resurrection School in Price Hill and Annunciation School in Clifton. So, we're preschool through eighth grade Catholic elementary schools, and 100% of our children attend our school on an Ed Choice voucher or a John Peterson Special Needs Scholarship. And so we're really proud to be huge school choice supporters. Our schools wouldn't exist if it weren't for the school choice opportunities here in Ohio.
I love it. And you know what, Emily? That's a testament to the fact that parents need choice.
Absolutely.
They need the opportunity. Yeah, they need the opportunity to pick what is best for their child. And clearly, by the existence of your schools, it shows that parents are choosing alternative options.
Yeah, I think every parent needs to pick what's best for every individual child. There are some children that need a big environment, like the high school that Tera and I
Yeah.
went to, that was 900 to 1,000 kids per class. Some
Yes.
children need a smaller environment that's 15 or 20 per class, like the school my husband went to. I think it really depends on the individual, and that's going to change by child, even within the same family. And so, for parents to have an option, regardless of their income, regardless of their zip code, to choose a school that works for their child is really important. Many of the children that attend Romero Academies are living at or above, I'm sorry, at or below the poverty level. And so their families are struggling to make ends meet. And if school choice didn't exist here in Ohio, they would be sending their child to the neighborhood school, even if it didn't fit the need that child has.
That's amazing. And I think that that's something to note, that sending a child somewhere just because that's the only option, I don't think really meets what we're all trying to gain with education, and that is meet the need of the child.
Exactly.
I think it's really important. And I think Becki would agree, being a former teacher,
Mhm.
that the goal of teaching is to make sure that we reach the child, not a system, not a
Exactly.
program, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I find it
100%.
yeah, yeah. So I think this is great. Um, Emily, tell us a little bit about your educational journey. I found that to be so encouraging. I was so excited well, first of all, to find out that we like grew up in the same neighborhood, but also, and to hear the sizes of classrooms. My school graduating class was 400 and something, and we were one of the largest classes ever. And so now to hear that there are 900 to
Yeah, I
1,200
think when
students
I
in our
when I graduated, it was like 800, and when my sister graduated 5 years after me, I think it was pushing 1,100. So I have no idea where they're at
unbelievable.
now, 20 plus years later, but still crazy.
Isn't that nuts? So tell me a little bit about your educational journey. We would love to share that with our listeners, because each one of us have our own special journey, and then also the area that we're working in with Becki and I with our children, and you working with other people's
Yeah,
children. So different journeys. Go ahead.
sure. So I grew up in Ohio before the Ed Choice Voucher program existed, and my parents, I'm the oldest of three daughters, and my parents, as I became kindergarten age, decided to move. They moved out of an urban area to a more suburban area with a school, into a school district that had many different options. I was born with cerebral palsy, and so we needed options for physical therapy in schools. We needed options that if I needed an IEP could serve that. And so my parents moved out of the house that they were in, and I think made a selfless choice to pick up and transfer our family. And that doesn't come without economic impacts. And so I was just really fortunate and blessed that they were able to do that. So from kindergarten through eighth grade, I attended a small Catholic school. That is what my parents felt was best for me. It's a lot of the reason why I do what I do today in Catholic education. So St. Michael's is where I went to elementary school. And it was a great school. I learned so much. I grew in my faith. And I think it helped establish a lot of the values that I have today. And then as it was time to look at high schools, the Catholic high school in our area is a beautiful 5-story building with no elevator. And for a physically disabled, 14-year-old, that was a stress, anxiety point for me. How was I going to carry my books and go up and down these stairs with large crowded hallways? And it just didn't seem like it was going to be the best option for me holistically. And so my parents chose to transfer me to the public high school in our area. And I had a phenomenal experience there. So much so that the following year, my parents chose to transfer both of my sisters into that school district. And so again, they were able to make a choice based upon the opportunities that were in our area. And then from there, I chose to move to Cincinnati and attend a small private university, Xavier University, that brought me back to my Catholic roots. And a small community, ironically the same size as my graduating high school, my freshman year class. So something I was familiar with, and I've been fortunate that those opportunities all existed for me.
That is amazing. And what I love about this story that really caught my eye, besides being the hometown girl and me knowing, all the places that you were mentioning, is the fact that this is kind of reverse choice.
Hmm.
You know, so many times our public district entities try to shoot down the choice option, and they don't realize that we might have to flip it on its head and say, Catholic education was what worked and what was best for you until it
Right.
didn't. And then you had to go back to what was available. And I think you would agree that we came from a really wealthy district.
Yes, absolutely.
Our district, yeah, very wealthy, very strong in providing. Like, my track coach was in charge of the special education classes, which I found it to be ironic when I had a child with special needs, that I knew what Nets had been
Yep.
doing, with students all those years. And but not everybody has that great school, that great district, and I talked to teachers from where we came from and how they're like, well, I can't even imagine not having the resources. And I said, but they're not every district in the state of Ohio, or in every state for that matter, has those options.
Right.
The district that we were living in Mansfield, Ohio, did not have the same philosophy and same model that I grew up in. And we weren't able to come back to Maslin. So Becki, do you find that, like, you went varying degrees of differentiation
Mhm.
for your daughter? So can we talk a little bit about how that mirrors Emily's model? I mean, you ended up going to a
Yeah.
Catholic school for her. Go ahead.
Yeah. I taught in public school, and I assumed that I knew the system well enough to help navigate our daughter through it. And in the middle, well, actually, it was before the middle of her kindergarten year, I realized this is not going to work. And so my friend, who was the principal of a local Catholic school, said, "We have openings." And I'm like, but we're not Catholic. And she's like, "Doesn't matter. Go ahead and enroll her." So we enrolled her in kindergarten, and she graduated from eighth grade last year. And it was the most phenomenal experience because, and I know this because I taught very part time at her school after I retired from public school. There's such an emphasis on how every child is an image bearer of God. And that is so powerful because, first of all, the class sizes at my daughter's school were smaller than the public school. And that, I believe, allowed teachers to be more individualized and customize education. And I don't think in those 9 years that my daughter was in that building, I don't think there was ever any doubt that she felt like she was loved and she belonged, and her teachers cared for her.
Right.
And it was a whole um, a whole person caring. It's not just academics. It was everything. And I became a big believer in Catholic education because that whole thing about children are image bearers. They are image bearers of God. They are gifts from God. Our kids need to hear that.
Yes.
And to hear it over and over year after year from varying adults, um, very powerful. And then after she graduated from 8th grade, we decided that the high school may not be the Catholic high school was probably not going to be a good fit for her. So we pivoted to homeschool. And now we do a homeschool co op once a week, which is also a very interesting experience. And I think it's been a good fit for a year now. And I just, I think it's so important that our children hear and understand the affirmation that they are made in the image of God. And so, as a mom, I thank you for what you do as a person in that system to help families with their children and just hear that. So thank you, Emily, for the part that you're doing in this whole
I feel
story.
blessed to do what I do. I started my teaching career in public education and was blessed to teach 120 seventh graders for 3 school years, middle school math. We had a lot of
Oh,
time, a lot of good times in my classroom. Um, and I think in that, I had young women come up to me and say, Miss Gilbride, we know that you believe in God. Can we have a Bible study? And it was like, no, we can't. We're in a public school right now. Can we pray before our test? And I'd say, oh, you can silently pray, but I can pray for you, but I can't pray with you. Because I took my role as a public school teacher very seriously, and I didn't want to offend any kids in my classroom. But I also very much felt like I was compromising a portion of my identity, and so I feel really blessed to be in an environment where I can help kids find a relationship with Christ if that's what their family chooses, and I can treat every child, with human dignity, and give them
yes,
what they need because that's going to be different for every single child. And I'm blessed to have
yes,
a team of educators that believe the same.
You know, I think that's amazing because education isn't just a 6 hour um, piece of time in a student's life. You know, education runs 24/7. And if your child or your family desires for your child to be educated in their faith as well, everything has to align and sync
yeah,
together. And I think for us to feel like we have to separate this out, and you said it, you know, that you had to turn it on and turn it off within the building. I will never forget in the 5th grade, we were asked to bring a free reading book. And we had these little, I remember they were green, you know, the Kelly green construction paper, and it was folded in half and it had our name on it. And inside, my English teacher or reading teacher, whatever she was called back then, would give you like little hash marks. And after you got 15 of them, I'll never forget this, you guys, this is a lot of years ago, but you would get to pick something out of the prize box. And so I remember that I brought my Bible. I had gotten saved and I had brought my Bible with me for my free reading. And I had gotten a little like reading packet, you know, different Bible verses dealing with character. And I was so excited because I was like, oh, it's important to, like you said, Becki, you know, we are image bearers of Christ. And so there I was reading, and that teacher came over, Miss O'Brien, I'll never forget it, and closed my book and told me, you need to take this home. This is not an appropriate reading material. And I remember I was devastated in my public school. And I went home and told my mom. And back in the day, you didn't argue with the teachers, and you didn't fight for your own personal rights, shamedly, I think. But I remember that, and I remember feeling like I had to turn off my person when I walked through the doors. And so I have such a great appreciation for Catholic education. I wasn't raised Catholic, but I have an appreciation for the fact that it's the whole encompassing individual. My children had the benefit of going to a Christian school, and the fact that their peers were able to come into my office, we called it the chalet because it had like this big round table in it. And I would tell them, if you have a worry, a concern, you're welcome to come at this table and I can sit and pray with you. And that was what it was appropriate for those students, those
Mhm.
families. And it was freeing. And then, Becki, as I've gotten to talk to you about some things and to some of other of my friends that are in different schools, one of my friends that worked with me at the private Christian school and has then transferred to public school. And she said, it's really different. Emily,
Mhm.
it's like what you described. She says, I can pray for them, but I can't pray with them. And I said, it's unfortunate, and I respect everybody's situation with that. I really do. However, I don't think that we should close off opportunities of choice for individuals. Number one, based upon, like you said, Emily, early on, zip code, finances, or just simply because that's the way it had always been done. I
Mhm.
think sometimes, just like with any other thing within our society, as time changes, we too need to change with time.
Mhm.
And I think our education system needs a little bit of an overhaul. So I'm enthusiastic because my son and I advocated so many years for that John Peterson scholarship. I'm so enthusiastic that your school in Cincinnati, are using that scholarship, and children are benefiting them. And it's a blessing to me to hear about that, to know, hey, that work wasn't just for Sam, it was for thousands of other children across our state, but also that there exists opportunities, Becki, in your state and across our nation, and the work that we do. So, any rate, anybody else want to add anything to the discussion? This is just exciting for me.
I just want to add that, there are many people, I mean, obviously nationwide, but I've had friends that were really um, dumbfounded that a parochial school would accept my daughter who uses a wheelchair. She has some learning differences, and there's that mindset of, well, parochial and private schools aren't going to deal with kids who have IEPs, and that's not true. That is not true. So, Emily, what would you say to encourage parents who maybe they have a student in their home with an IEP and they're like, I don't really feel like we have a choice? What would you say to encourage those parents?
Yeah, ask. There's no harm in asking. We have parents come to us every day and saying, my child has an IEP, or they're on the autism spectrum, or hey, I think they have occupational therapy needs. We don't have an occupational therapist on our staff. We cannot serve occupational therapy needs. We also, Becki, like we don't have an elevator in our building. So like yes, we would have love to accept your daughter, and she couldn't get to the cafeteria or the bathroom, and that's just like a
Mhm.
physical restraint of our building. And so I think
Right.
asking and saying like,
Yes.
"Is this possible?" We try in as many instances as we can to make it work. We don't want to turn any child away. That is like the worst part of my job. Is saying like, sorry, we can't serve this IEP, not because we don't want to, but because if we go back to exactly where we started, every single child is created in God's image and likeness. And if I'm going to respect that, I'm not going to
Yeah.
pretend that I can serve their needs when I can't, because that is disrespectful to God and to your child. And
Right.
so, we work really hard. We're blessed to have an incredible special education provider that we work with in our schools, who goes above and beyond, so much so that they're creating a specialized program here in Cincinnati for children with exceptional needs. So, on the spectrum or having Down syndrome.
Mhm.
And they're creating a Catholic school classroom for those children, because we have so many parents coming to us on a regular basis throughout Catholic education here in Cincinnati looking for options. And our public school, we're lucky that our public school for many kids serve IEPs very, very well and does great work for many, many kids. Um, but there is a percentage in the city that it's not going to work all perfectly for.
Mhm.
Well, and some of those things, some of those points that you brought together, when we started the program at the private Christian school, we didn't have the therapy. So I told the parents, hey, you know what? Your scholarship is for your child. So what portion would you like to allocate to our school? And then what portion would you like to allocate to an outside therapist? And we actually were able to contract a therapist on their behalf to come to the school after school hours because they weren't an employee of ours, but we gave them the location to meet. So there's different ways that that I think private education is able to say, hey, we don't offer this, but you have the power. That's the beautiful thing about a scholarship. And in the state of Ohio, you get to determine, you, the parent, direct the funds where you need them to go. No school, public or private, can then tell you, well, you have to spend XYZ amount of dollars with us. No, you can say, how much of your scholarship do you want to afford to this program or school? And then how much do you want to pay out of pocket? And so some of that was really beneficial for students to be able to let them to come to our school. And I love the fact that you said we don't want to turn any students away. Oftentimes, the alternative options or the naysayers want to say, oh, private schools don't have to accept everybody. Well, no, it's not that they don't have to. It's that exactly what you said, Emily. We're not going to be disingenuous and say, oh, yes, we can service them and then just take your money, which unfortunately oftentimes is what the public school says. And I have often argued when I testified here in the state of Ohio, I have argued and said, I'm not going to stand here and take students that I can't service. I would rather be honest about it, and I'm gonna say on behalf of the public schools, they can't service everyone either. So that's a
Exactly.
part of the law. Wouldn't you agree, Becky? That's a part of the
Yeah,
law that needs to change nationwide, is
absolutely.
just because they accept them doesn't mean they're servicing them well, and that's part of the conversation that I think needs to happen.
Absolutely. I saw that as a parent. I saw that as a teacher. It needs to be discussed.
Yeah, it needs to have we need to have a discussion about that. So I think it's exciting to hear about how other options are available within our systems and different opportunities. I love to hear your story, Emily. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
sharing
thank you
that
for
with
giving
us.
me the opportunity.
I love it. And Becky, thank you for sharing your perspective as a public school teacher. I think that if you have questions in the greater Cincinnati area or in the state of Ohio, you are welcome to contact us at any of the banners that have come across the screen. Feel free to reach out. Becky is always available as well to answer questions. You're welcome to reach out to find out if this is an option or what programs are up and coming. That's our goal, is to help parents and to give you hope that you might be able to find what works for you or find out a way to create what could work for you and someone else as well. So, Emily, thank you so much for joining us. Becky, thank you again. And to those of you out there, thank you so much for tuning in to Tuesday Talks with Mom. And we look forward to seeing you on another episode soon.